Breaking tonight, new fallout in the case of Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, accused of deserting his post in 2009, touching off a search that critics say led to the deaths of at least a half dozen men. We got reports this weekend Bergdahl will face court-martial on serious charges of desertion and more, but he may avoid any jail time and a lesser court-martial. Well, to weigh in tonight, presidential candidate Governor Mike Huckabee and former CIA intelligence operative and senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. We begin with Colonel Shaffer. All right, you have been one step ahead on this case the entire time. Are you surprised at all by the recommendation? What do you think comes next?
No, I think Mr. Fidel, the attorney, made a very compelling case. He tugged at everybody's heartstrings, presented a completely false narrative that somehow Bo Bergdahl was actually a good guy. He actually deserted his post, not to join the Taliban or take drugs, which has been reported, I believe, accurately, but to report wrongdoing of his fellow service members there at the front. Look, let me be clear on this. There was an investigation after Bergdahl left. There was no evidence of any wrongdoing. So I believe, Shannon, that one of the things we should be looking at is the fact that the whole defense is a lie. Therefore, I think that should be a mitigating circumstance against him to make it even worse. But unfortunately, right now, the recommendation is for what we call a special courts-martial,
which is lesser.
Which is lesser. A general court-martial would be the highest. That would that could result in life sentences, other very harsh punishment. With a special court-martial, the max he could probably get is up to a year in jail, which, in my judgment, is way too low for what the crime clearly was.
Okay, and what do you make of the testimony that we've heard from the Army investigator, Major General Kenneth Dahl, on this, who says, despite what many people have said, he says no troops actually died looking for Bergdahl?
That's false. I don't know what General Dahl was thinking. By our estimate, there was 7 U.S. soldiers, 3 British soldiers, all killed, incidental to looking for Bergdahl. Now, this is the problem. You cannot actually link each to Bergdahl's thing. The causal link is just not going to be there. You can't legally make the case. With that said, these soldiers were asked to divert from other missions to go and do a detailed search of a very hostile area. The Taliban were actually looking for the guys to come look for them. Therefore, they were ambushed a number of times. So therefore, I think it's very difficult to basically charge each incident. But there's no doubt that these individuals, these 10 individuals, died in the process of trying to find Bergdahl after he deserted his post.
Well, my understanding is now that General Robert Adams still has a say in this. There's a chance, anyway, that he may differ with the recommendation. Colonel, thank you for your service. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Here now, presidential candidate Governor Mike Huckabee. All right, Governor, your reaction to how this is now unfolding?
Bergdahl was a traitor. He was a deserter. And under the rules of the United States military, if you desert in the course of combat, you could face even up to the death sentence, which probably would have been handed to him in World War II. Here's another problem. We gave away 5 of the top Taliban leaders for this one guy who's a deserter. And by the way, the President of the United States broke the law when he did that, because the law requires 30 days notice to the members of Congress. He gave only a few days to Senator Dianne Feinstein. So there's a lot here, and I don't think this story ought to be over just because Bergdahl gets a slap on the wrist and maybe discharged. He should be dishonorably discharged. This should come to full circle, and I think some higher-ups in the military have a lot to answer for. It's apparent that they're politicizing this, and they don't want to offend the White House. That ought to be troubling to everybody.
Well, we will wait to see what the next step is here, and if this general, who can now make a different decision, decides to follow these recommendations or not. I'm no surprise that you're critical of the president's making a deal with the Taliban. You don't like the Iran nuke deal that he made either, and I know you're questioning his leadership overall. Your reaction to a bit of a struggle for him in explaining some of his decisions in that interview last night?
Well, it was a disastrous interview on the part of the president. He proved last night a point that I often make, that the most dangerous person in the room is the person who doesn't know what he doesn't know. And the problem with President Obama, he is completely confident of his ability. And as I used to say of someone who I will leave unnamed, he's often wrong, but never in doubt. And this is a president who is often wrong. But Shannon, he's never in doubt. He is convinced that he is the smartest guy in the room, and he doesn't know what he doesn't know. That's why we ended up with a terrible deal with Iran, a deadly one, let me say, a terrible deal for Bergdahl, a miscalculation in every part of the Middle East, whether it was Yemen, Egypt, Libya, Syria, wherever there could be a decision to be made, it's almost as if you could guarantee he would not read it right, and the result would be disaster.
All right, Governor, you want to replace him. But the latest polling, these are national Republican primary voters, puts you at 2%. You're tied for 9th place. How do you turn that around? And are you going to watch the Democrats debate tomorrow night?
I'm going to be driving across the state of Iowa tomorrow night during the debate. I'll be listening to it. Hopefully, I'll be able to at least listen to it.
All right. So your time there in Iowa, is that, where do you get traction? You've done well there, obviously, in the past. It's a different ballgame this time around. How do you turn 2% into a win?
Well, I look at these polls, and sometimes I just don't buy into it. But first of all, if we want to go on national polls, then let's go ahead and celebrate the election of Rudy Giuliani in 2008 and Herman Cain in 2012, because at this point, both of them were leading in national polls. And so if anybody believes that those polls really are a accurate predictor of who's going to be president, then, boy, history has been wrong repeatedly. We work hard. We work in the early states, because you can be an unbeaten Kentucky in the regular season, but in March Madness, if you don't win the early games, you're not going to be in the Final Four. And the presidential sweepstakes is just like that. You've got to win early states. That's what we're doing.
Hearts get broken in March Madness every year. All right, Governor, great to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, also tonight, Iranian media is reporting that a Washington Post reporter held in Iran for more than a year has now been convicted of charges of espionage. Our own James Rosen is on that story. He has that story next, and how this plays into the president's deal with Iran. And later, you're going to meet the university professor who just quit his job because the school is going to allow concealed carry guns on campus.
I just don't want to take the risk of teaching a very large class where students do get disgruntled because of the grading and how they perceive they should be doing.